Let's call to order the meeting of the Merrimack Planning Board for Tuesday, April 5th. Let's begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. Maureen, you want to lead us? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Okay. Couple of housekeeping items. Let me remind everybody that we'll address the board tonight to make sure the microphone is turned on and to speak clearly into it so that the folks at home can hear. Applicants and any speaking members of the public, please clearly identify yourself for the record when you begin to speak. Our next planning board meeting after tonight is currently scheduled for April 19th, 2022 at 7 p.m. in the Matthew Thornton Room. Let's see, we've got alternates and vacancies.
We'll need to fill for both Paul and Jamie.
Paul and Jamie. So both of our alternates will be in for voting positions tonight for Paul and for Jamie.
Nelson for Paul and Corey for Jamie.
Now switch them around. Whatever you like, sir. Whatever you like, sir. Okay. That is all of our next planning board meeting after tonight will be April 19th, 2022 at 7 p.m. in this Matthew Thornton room. And that completes the call to order. Tim, is there a planning and zoning administrator's report tonight?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your packet, you'll find a memo dated March 22nd with 3 regional impact determinations for the Black Diamond Holding lot line adjustment condo conversion, the Merrimack Smiles site plan, and the Ross self-storage, which are on the agendas for tonight and May 17. The reason the Ross determination is in this is that the planning board did not make a determination when it was first before you last month, so it's not on the agenda to May, but it doesn't make any sense to wait. We'll just take care of it here tonight. So staff recommends that the 3 projects are not of regional impact as they do not meet the criteria established by the board.
Thank you, Tim, for that introduction for the regional impact recommendations. What's the rule of the board? Move to accept the staff's recommendations. Is there a second? Yes.
Could you repeat the names I missed?
Black Diamond Holdings lot line adjustment and condo conversion. Merrimack Smiles site plan.
Those are the 2 that are on tonight's agenda.
Yeah.
And Ross self-storage site plan.
That's the one up near the bowling alley that was presented last month.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for that. It's okay. Motion and second to approve the staff's recommendations. Discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 7-0-0 for that. Tim, is there anything else that you have?
Nothing out this evening, other than it's nice to be back after a few months.
It is good to see your smiling face. Members of the board, do you have any questions for staff? Seeing none, let's proceed with our agenda for tonight. There are a couple of items that have asked for continuances, and so if you are here for the Flatley project, which is number 3 on the agenda, that one will likely be continued. If you're here for, what's the other one? Merrimack Smiles is on?
Correct, yes.
Merrimack Smiles, number 8 on our agenda, has requested a continuance, and if you're here for that one, you probably can save yourself an evening. With that in mind, let's proceed with our agenda. The third item on the agenda is the John Flatley Company as the applicant and owner, continued review for acceptance and consideration of final approval for a site plan to construct 2 48-unit apartment buildings in addition to the existing 240 units. In accordance with the most recently amended Flatley mixed-use conditional use permit, the parcel is located at 5 Gilbert Crossing in the I-1 Industrial, Aquifer Conservation, and Elderly Housing Overlay Districts and Wellhead Protection Area. It's tax map 6E, lot 37. It's case planning board 2022-7, and it's been continued from our January 18th and March 1st planning board meetings. The applicant has requested a continuance to
April 19. We just received revised plans and information yesterday afternoon, and with that information obviously not being able to be reviewed for tonight's meeting, I made the request of the Flatley folks to consider continuing. They have agreed to do so, so we should be in a better position on April 19th to give a full staff recommendation on the project.
Okay, with that in mind, what's the will of the board?
I would so move, Mr. Chairman, to move this item to the 18th of April, or
Motion.
19th.
Motion to continue to the April 19th meeting with no further notice to abutters. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Neil Anketell. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Noting the vote in the back of the room, 7-0-0. Lynn was wandering back there. Okay,
Having mic issues.
I've got an extra one, or she can sit here. Let's get that sorted out. Hang on one second.
You can share, we can share this.
No worries.
I
If
tried
you
this,
can't get it straightened out, there's 2 seats next to me with mics.
Wanna try this one? Take mine.
Okay. Thank you all for the patience while we work out our microphone issues. Item 4 on our agenda is Ktk Realty Trust as the applicant and owner continue to review for consideration of final approval for a site plan to operate a trailer suspension and repair business. The parcel is located at 20 Star Drive in the I-1 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts. Tax map 3D1, lot 12, case planning board 2021-42. This item is continued from the December 7th, 2021 and January 18 and March 1, 2022 planning board meetings. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you know, this was a project that's been going back and forth, dating back over a year to when the original project was brought forth as a waiver full site plan review. That project was eventually approved by the board, signed, and then appealed by the butters that have then brought that case to Superior Court. The court stayed that planning board decision, remanded back to us to correct a butter notice issue. In the meantime, the applicant has now presented a more fully designed and engineered set of plans. The applicant has provided that information to the board. It's been reviewed by the board. The public hearing was opened and closed at the March 1st meeting. And at that meeting, the board requested that the applicant's stormwater report be reviewed by our peer review consultant. That has been completed, and the revised plans that were submitted have addressed the issues that were raised during that peer review portion of the review. There are still questions, obviously, that are being raised by the abutters regarding the Star Drive turnaround. Our opinion remains that the appropriate venue for resolution of those issues is Superior Court, which would consider them once the planning board makes a decision. So the board, believe at this point, having granted the waivers at the previous meeting, can deliberate and make a decision, and the staff recommendation would be to grant conditional final approval with the conditions proposed in Robert Best's, in the staff's April 1st, 2022 memo.
Thank you, Tim, for the introduction. Can you quickly give us the high points of the peer review on the stormwater drainage?
Certainly. Hold on here. There was about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 comments. One is the regarding the slope of the grass swale to be revised. Understanding that the site might be limited to make a steeper slope, but the applicant should attempt to make it steeper if possible, and to also provide some coordination with New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services that they would be able to approve this swale as designed and provide copy of that correspondence to the town. There are a couple of links to reports and fact sheets in the document that was submitted that are out of date, so those need to be updated in the submission to the town. The applicant needs to confirm with the AOT that the activities occurring on site would not meet their definition of a high-load area. If they do, that any additional sampling would be required prior to anything happening with the construction on the site. Also, to provide some additional spot grading around the driveway entrance to create a small crest to make sure that the runoff goes into the swale as intended. Ensuring that the positioning and length of the culverts into the riprap won't cause point source discharge onto the butter's property. and also consider additional riprap at the top of the swale. The imagery from the report seems to show that there's some material and debris from an adjacent storage operation. The applicant or another party should remove that material to ensure that the riprap swale is in a proper state to effectively convey and treat the drainage, and that the applicant would be required to comply with all the Town of Merrimack's MS4 permit requirements regarding stormwater and record-keeping requirements.
Thank you, Tim. Is the applicant here? Come forward. For the record, although I wasn't here at the March 1st meeting, I did review all of the minutes and the materials that have been distributed over time, over the several opportunities with this particular application, and so I am prepared to participate tonight. Okay, board members, the last time we met, the board met, it conducted its public hearing and had the applicant introduce the project, accepted it as complete, considered the waivers, and then continued to receive that stormwater report that we just heard. And so we're at the point in the proceedings where the board can entertain dialogue amongst itself to deliberate, ask any questions of the applicant, and then consider any final action the board would like to take. What is the will of the board? Nelson?
Mr. Chairman, I'm of the opinion that we should approve this plan, giving it conditional final approval to the plan as submitted.
Subject to all the conditions in the staff's memo? Yes, sir.
Subject to staff's memo, yes, and the recently received drainage report.
Which would be covered in the staff memo as part
I
of the
thought
conditions.
so, but
Yep.
just double cover.
Yep.
There you go, double covered. Okay, is there a second for Nelson's motion?
If that's a motion, I will second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Does the board have any questions of the applicant? If none, then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 700. Thank you. Okay. Item 5 on our agenda is Powell Realty of Merrimack as the applicant and Thomas K. Powell as the owner. Continued review for acceptance and consideration of final approval. That we don't have a public hearing open, sir.
But you would just approve something without the public having say it.
There was a public hearing at the last session with the board. That's one that was not.
Continued.
Yep.
It was continued, there's been a new plan, revised plan sent in. There were different members on the board that were there for that, actually, for the multiple meetings that you've had, there have been different members of the board. The public would like an opportunity to present.
I appreciate your comments, Mr. Calica. The public hearing is not open tonight.
It was closed.
It was closed last time. Okay. Let me begin again with item number 5 on the record. Powell Realty of Merrimack as the applicant and Thomas K. Powell as the owner. Continued review for acceptance and consideration of final approval for a waiver of full site plan review to allow a caretaker accessory dwelling unit within an existing restaurant. The parcel is located at 595 Daniel Webster Highway in the C1 Limited Commercial Elderly Housing Overlay and Aquifer Conservation Districts and Wellhead Protection Area. Tax map 6D1, lot 41, case Planning Board 2022-10. The items continued from the February 15th and March 15th Planning Board meetings. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This project results from a staff violation notice that was discovered in a routine inspection by the fire department at the property. After communicating with the property owner and the fire department, it was made clear that this dwelling unit has actually existed at the Tequila Flat Building for close to 40 years. It's currently used by the owner of the property when he visits from out of state and is not used otherwise. The applicant did obtain a special exception from the zoning board back in October to authorize the residential use on the property, and this action by the planning board would simply be to finalize that and legitimize the historical use of this as a caretaker unit.
Thank you, Tim. Tortilla, though, not tequila. Tortilla flats. Is the applicant here? Come on forward. I'm glad you were able to make it tonight. I know we've had a couple of misfires. I think this one's almost simple enough that we could have gone ahead without you, but go ahead and introduce yourself. Make sure, yeah, turned on. My name's Brittany Smith. Touch it again. That didn't work very well. You don't have to hold it. Just touch it and make it, the light's really bright.
Brittany Smith.
Brittany
And
Smith.
I'm the applicant here on behalf of my dad, Thomas Powell.
Excellent. Tell us about what's going on, what the situation is with that.
He pretty much covered it.
Yeah.
It's been existing for over 40 years. It's on, I don't know which side, it's top level of the restaurant, half of it, and there's just storage up there. There's an office up there. The owner, my father, and his sister both live 2+ hours away, so they use it when they come down for business. They may use it once a year, twice a year. They may not come down at all. I mean, it's not used very often.
Okay.
Everything's to code, everything's up there. It's been, I don't know why this was brought up in the 2021 inspection. It's the same as it's been, and they check it every year.
Understand completely, and I think from the planning board standpoint, at least my approach on the planning board is always to receive these things with a view towards getting back into compliance and
Whatever needs to be done.
achieving that. To me, I wouldn't see any reason why this wouldn't have been allowed at the beginning if it was brought forward, and so I don't have any particular issue with it. Understanding that if the board does approve it, even though the applicants represented that it's used once or twice by the owner, it's essentially,
I mean, it could be more.
it's
It's all over the place.
if we approve it, it's an apartment.
Yep, yep.
And so with that said, do the board members have any questions for? If not, let's see, we've got to vote to determine that it's complete.
So moved.
The second?
Motion and a second to determine the application's complete. If there's no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Are there any abutters or interested citizens who wish to weigh in? Seeing none, we'll consider the public hearing open and closed. The applicant is seeking a waiver of full site plan review, and the staff recommends that the board vote with respect to that based on one of the two statutory criteria that are in the memo. What is the will of the board?
Thank you. I move we grant the waiver for full site plan review based on strict conformity would pose an unnecessary hardship to the applicant, and the waiver would not be contrary to spirit and intent of the regulations.
Is there a second for Lynn?
Second.
Second by Counselor Healy. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 7-0-0. It's now the appropriate point in the proceeding to decide any final action the board would like to take. What's the will of the board?
I move we grant final conditional approval to the application with the recommendations in the staff memo.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Nelson Disco. Discussion? See, I told you we could have had this done without you here. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 7-0-0. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for coming in. Okay. Item 6 on our agenda is Merrimack Parcel A LLC as the applicant, and Merrimack Parcel A LLC and Slate Merrimack Acquisition LLC as the owner. It's a conceptual discussion of a proposed amendment to a previously approved mixed-use development conditional use permit. The parcel is located at 10 Premium Outlets Boulevard in the I-2 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts and Wellhead Protection Area, Tax Map 3C, Lot 191-2 and 191-2, U1, O2, U4. Boy, that is a long lot number. Case number Planning Board 2022-15. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicants?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. In your packet, you'll find my memo dated April 1st, which is a fairly detailed history of where we've gone to get to this point. This tonight is, to remind the board, a conceptual discussion for non-binding feedback to the applicant relative to their potential application to further amend the mixed-use conditional use permit for the Park Place project. This originally was before the board in 2017, granted and then amended and signed again in 2021 to redo the phases that were approved at that point. This was originally what I would call a real true vertical mixed-use project, urban-style development with retail and restaurant uses on the first floor and additional residential above. with office, commercial, and restaurant uses. It was a project that staff was very excited about. Had to receive a variance from the zoning board to be allowed in this location, as our mixed-use conditional use permit typically is only allowed on Daniel Webster Highway, where you have 50 acres of land and over 500 feet of frontage. So based on that original design, the zoning board granted the variance and the planning board granted a conditional use permit. Was then amended to revise the design to a more, I guess I would call suburban-style mixed-use, single-use buildings with 224 apartment units, 110-room hotel, about a 7,400 to 7,600 square foot restaurant, and then a second phase, which would include a parking deck as well as additional restaurant, office, and retail space. Now, what is being proposed by the applicant is to revise Phase 2 to completely eliminate those non-residential uses of the office, retail, and additional restaurant, and the parking structure, which would then be replaced with 208 additional residential units and 271 surface parking spaces. The Zoning Board of Adjustment granted a variance back in 2021 to permit this to come back to the planning board for consideration with a cap of 208 units. That zoning board variance does not bind the planning board to require them to grant the 208 additional units. It simply allows the application to come back before you for review under the conditional use permit criteria. Staff communicated, I think, fairly clearly to the applicant when this idea was originally proposed to us, that it was not something that staff would support. We don't feel that this is in the spirit and intent of what a mixed-use project is supposed to be, and feel that the density that we're talking about on a parcel of this size is far too much, and it's essentially what you'd be looking at is 432 dwelling units, 120 hotel rooms, and I consider the hotel essentially to be a transient residential use, and the only true non-residential use that would be left here is that small restaurant. That I don't believe is in the spirit and intent of the ordinance. The density we're talking about here is about 32.8 dwelling units per acre. This is about a 13-acre site with 432 proposed units on it. If you use our base residential density in Merrimack, that is about, it's how many times? A little over 30 times more dense than what would typically be allowed in the residential district, and it's 5.5 times more dense than what we allow in our planned residential developments. Additionally, that density number is actually higher because under the criteria for the mixed-use conditional use permit, you need to subtract out the areas of open space and non-residential use. So the calculated density is actually even higher than the numbers that I've cited in the memo here tonight. I have not gone through and done a specific review against the criteria of the ordinance at this stage, being a conceptual discussion. And I think that at this point, it's appropriate for the board to have a back and forth with the applicant to discuss the merits of the proposal. However, I will say that if a proposal were to come forward with this type of design and in this fashion, it would very highly unlikely that staff would be able to support it, and we would go through a more detailed discussion of the ordinance at that time.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for the introduction. Let me add to that two things. One is providing a little bit further explanation of the procedure that we're undertaking under a conceptual design review. The applicant has not proposed a project with which we could vote and approve. This is just for general discussion. And because it's a conceptual design review, it also hasn't had the normal abutter notifications. And so it is a discussion. And it's up to us to, lead that and perhaps have some public input along the way and provide the applicant with some feedback about what we would think if such a proposal came forward. But nothing gets voted on tonight, nothing gets built, nothing gets moved forward. This is only a conceptual. Second thing I wanted to mention is I think we all have, or at least I do, a correspondence in the record. Which when we get to the point of having public opinion, public input, I want to read into the record, and I just wanted to mention that, Tim, so you could remind me that I don't forget. This correspondence dated March 31st, 2022 from Beth Burns. With that in mind, let me ask the applicant to introduce yourself and tell us where we are.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, touch the microphone button.
There we go.
There we go. Better.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jay Leonard. I'm a lawyer in Nashua. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. I have with me David Fenstermarker, who's with VHB. He's our engineer. And Tom Monahan is behind me. He represents the company that owns the properties. So I think the obvious place to start here is a response of sorts to Mr. Thompson's comments, and we've reviewed those. We appreciate his point of view, but we respectfully disagree pretty much in all points. The history is accurate, but recently it's important, I think, to take a look at the variance that was actually granted, and if you don't mind, I'd focus first on that. At the last zoning board hearing, we actually went to the zoning board because the planning office asked us to get confirmation for a new variance for two issues, the density and the use. It was their point some months ago that this didn't meet the original variance, so we sought a new variance at the direction of the planning staff. When we went to the zoning board, and I don't mean to make this too long here, but we specifically told the zoning board that we were here for those issues. Excuse me. We were here for those issues, and I represented to the board that this project was before the zoning board because we were looking for 208 additional apartments to the development. We specifically told the zoning board that we were replacing the prior approved plan, that is, the office building and the parking garage, which was going to be part of phase two. We were replacing that phase two with 208 apartment units. And that was the purpose of going to the zoning board of adjustment. The zoning board of adjustment granted the new variance, allowed it, and specifically said that they were addressing the density issue as requested by the planning board. In fact, Mr. Price at the board told the zoning board, that's what we need you to decide, density. So we went through that process, we got that approval. It's actually a second variance. Right now, what you see out there is phase one under construction, and it's in the works, and it is our view that this is very appropriate. In our view, the zoning board has essentially said that this property is permitted to use for residential and specifically up to 208 multifamily market rate apartment units. These are, by the way, rental apartments. We also would disagree, and we presented a detailed, and I think it's important that this board have in its record the minutes of the zoning board and the application of the zoning board. The narrative that was associated with the application and the minutes are very clear on what was discussed and accomplished at that hearing. And the reason for this, keep in mind, I'm sure this board knows as well as anyone, but the zoning board determined that this particular property was unusual, had special circumstances that justified this variance. And we specifically talked about a proposal for 208 apartments in this property. It's a 20-acre site, it's dense, and it's intended to be dense. And I'm a little baffled by the comment from Mr. Thompson. I mean, we have a wonderful working relationship. We appreciate his comments, but I'm baffled because the whole purpose of this site and this variance was to put a dense project on. And in fact, the purpose of mixed use within the town zoning is specifically to accomplish uses in a dense fashion where the infrastructure is appropriate and where we can protect typical districts from a more dense project. So in other words, one of the specific goals of mixed-use project is an especially dense residential component. I'd also point out that the mixed-use concept under the zoning ordinance does not require any particular components of mixed uses. It simply says that it should complement the uses around it. And we went through all of those considerations before the zoning board. There's obviously industrial uses, light industrial uses, and retail up on the hill. This is, as everybody knows, it's at the foot of the hill of the outlets. So I guess we very much believe that we demonstrated to the zoning board that this proposal is in fact very consistent with the purposes of the mixed-use district. It is our position that the zoning board decision said to the planning board, this is appropriately permitted for up to 208 additional apartments, and that the planning board should look at the criteria associated with a conditional use. And that criteria is very specifically set out, and it really talks about things that you would expect a conditional use permit to talk about, things like integration with industrial, commercial, and residential development, a master plan, complementary to other surrounding uses, fiscally beneficial. This project today is fiscally beneficial, and this new addition alone is fiscally beneficial to the town. Efficient use of public services and expanded opportunities for diversity of residential developments outside of the traditional residential districts. That's why this property is unique. It offers an opportunity for a residential component that cannot be had in other places in the town. And it's our view that that's what the zoning board said, and we do not agree with Mr. Thompson's interpretation of their order. And I think that the minutes and the application would support our position. I recognize that that's an issue. I don't know if we can talk about that, because obviously that's a big thing. But David Fenstermarker can take you through the particular details of the plan. We would certainly enjoy and love to hear your comments, but it is our view that we can proceed with an apartment complex on that second phase.
Okay. So I definitely want to hear the details of the plan and have some discussion about that. As to disagreements about the effect of or what was approved by the ZBA, it isn't the planning board's role to interpret a ZBA decision. The planning and zoning administrator would make that interpretation. And then if the applicant disagrees with that, you could appeal that to the ZBA, as they would any other planning and zoning administrator's decision. So the planning and zoning administrator would be the one in the initial first case to say a variance is needed for A, B, and C. And the planning board couldn't overrule that or make any other decisions with it. And the same sort of construct applies to whether we could apply a legal interpretation to what the zoning board did. That in the first instance is the planning and zoning administrator's role. But I do want you to read to me what the zoning board voted upon, or what, not necessarily all the discussion of the 5 criteria, but what was asked.
The specific notice.
Yeah. Do you have that available?
I do.
Or Tim, if you have it available?
The variance was to permit a mixed-use development conditional use permit to be sought from the planning board at a higher residential density than was originally approved by variance on a lot in the I-2 industrial district.
Okay. Again, it's not for us to interpret the ZBA, but it certainly sounds like they're leaving the planning board to do the planning board's job, which is as a conditional use permit to do all the things we do, which is proper anyway. I mean, that's what they should do.
Well, I guess what I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, is that the planning board left you to discuss the criteria, but it doesn't talk about density. The zoning board decided that it could be up to 208 units so long as we met the criteria. And I will also say that the reason we went to the zoning board is because the staff and the zoning director or zoning administrator asked us to. So we have done that.
Yeah, no question. I think the wording of that variance request, though, is deliberate to make sure that they don't intrude upon the planning board's authority to consider in a conditional use permit the, all of the things that are going on with the conditional use. Anyway,
Okay.
I want to hear some of the details and have some other discussions about other parts of this. I don't know that we'll resolve that particular question, it's certainly not in a conceptual design review. But I do want to hear the explanation for the way that it's set up and the choices that were made, and let the board have some opportunity to chew on that for you.
Great. So Dave Fenstermacher from VHB, and I think Tim's memo does a really great comprehensive job of walking through the evolution of the site, but I thought take this opportunity to give you guys a little bigger picture than what's in the document. So starting off with the 2017 plan, at that point, we had the residential up, forget my bearings, but up Continental near Camp Sargent. The office and parking deck were then down at the corner, International, and then there was some vertical buildings that had mixed use in the hotel.
I'm just getting a better view, don't worry about it.
Okay.
Proceed. Go ahead.
Yep. And then we came in, this was the amended plan where, again, same mix for number of office space, retail, residential. It was just, reorientated on site where the hotel and the restaurant were along this side, and we have the U-shaped apartment building. And what we're calling this phase 2 was the additional building with office, retail, and restaurant, and the parking deck. And as we moved into phase 1 site plan approval, again, from that approved conditional use plan, basically matched that with the restaurant, the hotel, and the apartment. So just relating this back to the approved one, this is that top area where we're calling phase 2. And the plan that we came in to the ZBA with, and subsequently as part of this conceptual discussion, is in that area where we had basically the footprint of an office building and a parking garage within that same developmental area, not encroaching any further towards the abutters, but it will be the 208 units with a mix of parking underneath and surface parking. But, the 75% of the rest of the site remains the same, but this is the new piece here. So this is really where it's going in the same area, it's not impacting the utilities or, the stormwater. There's actually a reduction in the traffic that's generated from this site with the change in use. But at this point, for the purpose of the conceptual discussion, this is where we've taken it so that we could have the discussion with you on if there's any additional questions on the details.
Okay. Thank you for that, and thank you for going over the plan. Is there any open space or recreational space anywhere on the site?
Not so much as a common area. There's the walkways and then the open space that's remaining up to the north.
So there's like 400 whatever apartment units and no place to walk a dog or for the kids to play, or?
Not that's been set aside at this point.
Okay.
They do have their amenity center for the apartment with the clubhouse and a pool area.
Okay. Is there sidewalks that sort of connect to within the development to get back and forth between the restaurant or the apartments, or?
Yeah, we're not showing that on this plan, but there will be, there's walkways that come around the existing. Those will run along the front and up towards the roundabout, and we can connect it to the restaurant and the hotel. So there's a system there, and we'd probably just sort of duplicate that system and make it consistent.
Part of our conditional use permit criteria deal with the idea of complementary uses. Is the hotel complementary to the residential in any way?
No, it's independent.
Okay. The criteria,
complementary-
the whole point of doing the master plan thing is to create things that are complementary, like somebody might live there and use a pharmacy on the first floor, or, go to the restaurant, certainly there is a restaurant here, or a daycare, or maybe there's people that have the office and they work and they live in the same place, or, things that may not 100% align with every single person that comes on the site, but there's some
So in that
complementary uses.
I appreciate your comment there, and we have worked basically, this is that kind of place. There's Fidelity across the way. There's industrial, we'll call them light industrial and office uses, manufacturing along Continental, so that this serves a very important purpose for the overall area. There's substantial retail up the hill. In fact, this was part of what was originally one tract for the outlets. And it is subject to many of the covenants associated with the outlets, so that the complementary use here, really, we can't have much in the way of retail, because it has to be something that does not compete with the outlets. The hotel is specifically to complement the needs of the outlets and the needs of businesses such as Fidelity and some of the other. And so also is the residential apartment complex. We have heard from many employers that the biggest thing that they don't have is a place for people to live. And people who are coming into the area, young people who are interested in smaller or rental situations, as opposed to some other kind of housing. This kind of housing is not offered any other place.
Pardon me?
Well, it's not offered. This is actually upscale market rate. It's not subsidized in any fashion, and it's we think it's a unique property.
I don't think
But-
any of the three other ones that are under construction in town are subsidized or fail to be market rate.
Well,
Apartments.
okay, it is what it is, and if I'm wrong there. But I will say that the
There's four.
demand for rental housing is tremendous, and the state of New Hampshire has a shortage in the demand in rental housing. And this rental housing complements all of the uses that are surrounding it. And that's where we
Okay.
believe that we meet the requirements of the.
I understand the
yeah.
argument. I think that the regulation is set out so that the mixed uses on the site are complementary with each other, not necessarily that they're complementary with the things in the universe around them. That wouldn't have any conditional use permit component, which is, why most of the other residentials haven't had mixed conditional use permits. If you disagree,
Yeah.
quote
No.
ordinance to me.
Pardon me?
If you see something in the regulation that I'm sideways with, tell me.
Well, no, I'm not sure it's sideways. I think it's an interpretation. I don't think that the ordinance actually calls for complementary uses within the development. It calls for complementary uses and surrounding uses. The whole idea of a mixed-use project doesn't require mixed uses, really, under your regulation. It only applies in very localized areas that are supported by roads and infrastructure that allow for densities and uses that can be concentrated. And I don't believe, and I don't
Well,
read it, that it has to be mixed.
I'm confused by that, because this certainly seems to be a location that's got the concentrated densities highest
Yeah.
that we've got anywhere. But you earlier, you read part of the first conditional use permit criteria. Can you
Okay,
read that
so there's two components. One I read was the purposes. And
So read that one.
So what the purposes says is to permit mixed uses which allow creative integration of industrial, commercial, and residential housing developments based on a master site plan that permit flexibility in the design and integration of permitted uses. So it doesn't say that there have to be mixed uses on site. It says that it has to be an integration of those uses.
It says on the site plan.
It
It
says.
says it's a master planned site. with
Right.
And
integrated
it
uses.
is a master plan site.
Okay. I think that we're going to disagree on the interpretation of that. I think that as we have operated with our conditional use projects, much like the outlet mall, where in addition to stores, you have a place to eat. You've got a bank. You got a coffee shop. You've got sort of things that go together while you're there. You might go from one to the other. And they've
Okay.
recently come forward and asked for some permission to do things like an auto show or something else that would drive traffic and be complementary to their, that's the concept of this conditional use permit.
I would caution you against using that because it's not the same type of conditional use permit. That's a specific conditional use permit for outlet village shops. The comparison to this would be Edgebrook and Flatley.
Sure. And that makes sense, Tim. Tim, thank you for reading it. I wasn't necessarily suggesting you had to do the outlet village type, but I was explaining the idea of complementary uses and what that generally looks like on a site. And they're the kinds of things where someone that comes to the site might use more than one of the various amenities on the site because they live there and they go to the restaurant. And I'm trying to figure out how the hotel fits in with that because it doesn't really complement the residential at all. Nobody that lives there will stay in the hotel, and nobody that stays in the hotel will live there.
So, okay, so I understand what you're saying. There obviously, hotel is a different use, and we would disagree that it's a residential use because you can't build a hotel in a residential area. So.
Yeah, I'm not saying that the hotel is residential
No,
uses.
but Mr. Thompson made that argument.
I'm not arguing that it's residential. It is a residential-ish use, essentially. It's a transit residential type of situation. It is a commercial use. I don't disagree with that. But I think, but what we're getting at is, and I think one of the reasons why the hotel worked in this site with the original design was you had the other non-residential uses that were the complementary uses.
Well, and the hotel also had its little event center and its own restaurant inside of it and some things that people might come and enjoy the hotel for, even if they weren't staying overnight.
So part of the problem, though, is, and I'm sure this board knows as well as anybody, we've had some changes in this world of ours. And in view of the pandemic and the way real estate is now, there is a huge demand for apartments, and there is no demand for offices. And the options are, you can leave this vacant, I suppose, but that's not what we want to do. I mean, you
No,
can't.
but the applicant's the one that chose to proceed under the conditional use permit construct and not come with a single use for the site. And if he had come with a site and said, I want to do all residential, we could have evaluated it from that viewpoint and decided what to approve. And not sort of started out with this beautiful streetscape and Main Street with, brick walkways and kiosks in the middle of the road and all of those kinds of things. Very picturesque, the way it was presented to start out with, and not a bit of that has survived.
I agree completely. But that doesn't mean that what we have isn't appropriately presented. Keep in mind, and I know I'm arguing something that you're not going to decide, but that was exactly the comment from Mr. Thompson, and then he said, you need to go back to the zoning board, and we did. We went to the zoning board with that plan and told them, we can't build offices, it doesn't work, we'd like to build 208 more apartments, and they said, yes, go ahead, present it to the planning board. Now,
That's the key. The why we as staff required this to go back to the zoning board. Again, this is not a site that allows for the mixed-use conditional use permit to even be applied. That was granted back in 2015 or whatever, however many years ago it was, based on that initial urban design concept, and that was what was then allowed to move forward to the planning board. When this proposal came forth for the additional 208 units, our determination is what you're presenting is no longer consistent with the variance that the zoning board granted then. You need to go back to the zoning board as a first step to allow them to let you proceed to the planning board for that. And that's the reason why the notice and the decision was written the way it was with the zoning board, was to preserve the planning board's authority to review and approve this against the criteria in the ordinance.
even though they were asked to specifically decide about density. The zoning board was.
I think that, I have little doubt that you had that in your discussion with the planning board about what you were proposing, but the actual ask was what Tim read, which is, doesn't have anything about a specific number of units, and it doesn't have anything about.
There was a condition that said that should the planning board decide to grant it, it'd be no more than 208.
No more than.
And the representations in the hearing were part of the approval, as they always are. I appreciate where the board's coming from.
Yeah, and
But
will-
I think if we step back and think about what's really going on here, we had no way to answer Tim's question. Basically, what the planning staff is asking is, and with all due respect, they didn't like the zoning board decision to allow up to 208, so now they're asking that the planning board change that number. And
Well, by the fact that you just said up to 208 means that there's a different number that the planning board can land on, and so.
you know what, I'm okay if it's a, something, but if it's a reasonable discussion on some of those units. But I think what Tim is saying, with all due respect, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is that this is no longer a mixed-use plan. And really what we did was we said to the zoning board, this is our plan. We need a variance for it. Grant us a variance, and we're happy to go to the planning board and show them that we meet other
Yeah,
criteria.
no question, zoning boards don't approve plans, though. They
No,
don't even weigh in on the
I
plans.
understand that.
And
anyway,
as
let's-
staff, we can't weigh in and make recommendations to the zoning board. So the reason for the wording on this was to ensure that staff and the board would have full say in this, was to make sure that it was worded in such a way that left the authority to the planning board for final decision-making.
So I do think, though, that the question really becomes, is staff asking us to refrain from developing phase 2 until we can build an office building?
I think that the planning board is the view is the thing that I can answer for you, and not so much the staff's. I'll let the staff speak for themselves. I would like to see a proposal that's got complementary master planned related uses within it. And a whole bunch more residential, and a hotel that doesn't really fit in with anything, and a restaurant that is a quarter of or a third of the size of what was originally proposed for restaurant space, you know, in addition to, it doesn't meet what I'm looking for in terms of a master planned or conditional use permit site being actually developed with some synergies. In addition to the fact that there's it's 4 buildings in the middle of a parking field. I don't even see like a landscape island where there might be some grass, or like I said, where you'd walk your dog. I don't see where you'd put a bike rack. I don't see where someone would, go outside with their kid if they lived in these apartments. This is 10 pounds of apples in a 5-pound bag. And those are some of the comments that I have with respect to, what belongs in a master planned site. The sidewalk doesn't go all the way around the site like it used to. It sort of dumps people in the middle of a parking lot. There's just so many pieces of this that aren't what we expected based on the initial review. With that in mind, I'm only one person, and let me stop talking and see what my colleagues think.
So, first off, I loved the approved plan in 2017. It did look inviting, it looked really interesting, and it looked like something that, exactly what we would want for that. Now I'm reading that you want to remove 93,000 square feet of office, 37,000 plus of retail, and then 21,000 square feet of restaurant, and add more apartments. The living space certainly outweighs any other use, and to me, that's not like a mixed use by any means. And you say that it complements other things in the area. I just don't see how it meets the intent of the regulation at all, in my opinion.
Thank you, Neil. Hands over here. Maureen, have at it.
So I just wanted to comment on the part about complementing, like, the light industrial and the outlets, and especially hearing that it's going to be upscale apartments. I don't think people could afford, who's working in the industrial, light industrial, and working at the outlets, could afford to live there. I think even if it's young people that are coming in over to work at wherever, BAE or wherever Fidelity, young people, I mean, the prices are extremely high for young people right now. So I just don't see how that complements at all if we were trying to reach for that.
Barbara, or Nelson? Barbara first. Go ahead.
So, based on the information that was submitted, you are estimating the need for 271 spaces for parking, but you've got 208 units. Now, based on the fact that most young adults are usually either in some type of relationship and both have cars, that's easily 436 additional cars for those 208 units. And that's not including if we happen to have a 3 or 4 person family move in that have 16-year-olds, and now we have a third car. So I would make the recommendation that based on site in the ordinance for site plan regulation section 3.4, we recommend a full site assessment, traffic assessment, based on the traffic that we have coming out of the outlets, the existing traffic for what's already been built and will be inhabited, and also on this additional potential 208 units.
If this were to move forward, there would need to be a traffic component for both the amended CUP and for any future site plan beyond that.
But I'm saying a full traffic study.
That would be the board's decision if you wanted to go
Yeah.
beyond.
Well,
this.
we can recommend that the board, please, think about it.
Absolutely, and I think there was also, in the earlier iteration of this, a lot of discussion that was very persuasive about how complementary uses used parking at different times of the day, and you'd have flex parking spaces where something that's a residential parking space at night, when that person leaves for work, now the hotel has a space or the restaurant has a space, and we did a lot of calculation and consideration of how that parking could actually work. It was a really important and a really persuasive discussion. And now all of these parking spaces are used at night and available during the day. And whatever that calculation, whatever that consideration, completely out the window, and you start over with that. Tim, what's your sense with how this site would meet our parking calculations as applied today?
Excuse me for that. Our residential multifamily parking requirement is based on number of bedrooms, so it would vary depending on what the bedroom count is as it moves through the process, but give me just a second.
Yeah, understood. And I
would
shudder
be-
at the idea of putting
yeah.
more spaces on the site, because, man.
The requirement for multifamily dwellings is 0.5 per bedroom plus 0.5 per dwelling unit plus 1 guest parking space for every 10 units.
Okay.
So it's basically if you have a 1-bedroom apartment, you require 1 space. For a 2-bedroom apartment, you require space and a half, and then you add the the guest space for every 10 units.
Okay. So 224 and 208, if they were all 1 bedroom, you'd be at 436 plus 40, 44. You'd be about 500 spaces just for the residential before you get to the hotel and all that. How many spaces are on this plan? Does anyone know?
On the new part of the plan or on the existing?
The whole thing, every inch of the site.
There's the table in the package that
I think,
if you go to the current approval, there are 1,290 spaces provided. Phase 1 had 701. Phase 2 had 600 with the parking deck. The revision would be from reducing the 600 spaces to 271.
So 972 total.
So 972 total spaces.
972 total on the site, hotel, restaurant, and the whole thing?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So I think there's a way to make that math work with that many spaces. How many rooms in the hotel? 110?
110.
And 254 seats in the the restaurant. So what's that going to give you? That's going to give you about 120 cars. depending on that. Anyway, what the parking, this is conceptual, we don't have to work this out tonight, but parking has got to satisfy the regulations and make sense, and I think there's, to agree with Counselor Healy, the potential for the board to consider whether the calculation in the table is reasonable or needs any adjustment as well. Not that I want any more parking spaces on the site, because I'm already saying I don't see any place for there to be, there's no open space, there's not a square inch of anything that isn't dedicated to parking here. When we think of our master plan with compact development, it's to be not automobile-centric and to have walkable spaces that you can get from one place to another, and open spaces, and the beautiful streetscape that went down the boulevard that you had in the original proposal. Nelson, I haven't given you a chance yet.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to really agree with the position of the staff on this, and to note that when we made the rule changes, if you will, for mixed uses like this, we had in mind and in purpose a combined use, a combined set of uses that were complementary to each other and would mesh with each other and satisfy certain requirements that each had without going off-site or anywhere else. It was an integrated plan. This completely goes away from that. We've abandoned the retail altogether. We've crammed in as many residential places as could possibly fit, and I think it defeats the purpose of a planned unit development, that would be a mixed use, which is what we had in mind when we made these changes to the zoning. When we made the changes to the zoning, we had to make an exception for this site because it was smaller than most of the sites that we had in mind when we wrote those regulations. And now we've squeezed it down, and now we're squeezing out some of the important amenities of retail use and so on to keep people integrated into a neighborhood that would live together and work together, if you will, or play together. And I don't see that in this at all. So I would not be in favor of increasing the housing density on this site right now. That would be my opinion, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Lynn, give a hand up.
I can appreciate what they're trying to do because I know that there is absolutely no demand for commercial retail space in the area. There just is no demand for it at all. So you could build it, you're not going to fill it. There is a huge demand for rental units. But you're doing high-end, targeting young professionals, and those young professionals want the amenities right there. They don't want to get in their car and go down the street. They want to go down the elevator, go out the front door, and walk next door. They want the retail there. They want the complementary businesses, the pharmacy, the hair salons, all of those things. They want them there. They want to walk to them. That's your young professional that you're targeting. So eliminating that and just building more residential, while I appreciate your desire to build more residential because that's what you can fill. I don't agree with eliminating the rest of it.
Dan? Brian?
So a couple questions. I wasn't here, obviously, when the original plan was put forth, but is there a reason you guys went away from having ground floor retail? Is that the covenants?
No. Well, two comments on the retail. Retail isn't really permitted there are some specialized uses that we were going to try to make, but I think in the zone itself, retail's not permitted. There are also covenants that say that to the extent there is retail, it can't compete with what's up the hill. So we're very limited on what we might do. We can refer to it as retail, but it's not really retail in the sense that we're probably talking generally. But the real reason, and I think you're asking why the change, the real reason is that, just as was recently stated, there is absolutely no demand for office space or for lack of a better word, retail. And there is tremendous demand for rentals of all rates. And that's what's in demand in that immediate area. I appreciate the comments. We understand, and believe me, if Mr. Monahan thought that he could build an office building that people would occupy, we would be doing that, but it's just not happening. So it's really all about the real estate economics and the viability of a project here today.
And another one, I assume like if I wanted to rent one of these apartments, right? I would want to walk to the outlets. Has that been thought through?
There's a,
There's a walkway that goes
Okay.
up and it connects down around the roundabout.
and to the chair's comment, our intent is that this will be all connected as much as we can, but we believe it'll all be connected on this particular 20 acres as well. So this 20 acres will have walkways that connect each component, but it also gets you up the hill.
It doesn't now. I mean, the new apartment building doesn't even connect to the clubhouse. No crosswalk across that parking lot. There's no walkway. There's no entryway that would get you to your pool from that. I mean, that's what I mean, that's how little the thought appears to be put into, how these things are synergistic. And I get that there's some limitations with what the outlet mall is. That's a private deal. And, to the extent the property's got that obligation with it, that's, not the planning board's question. That doesn't sort of land in our interpretation, in our purview to try and sort out. But there are a number of kinds of things that are, instead of being a retail where you're purchasing something, they're the service related, the hair, the dry cleaners, the Merrimack 360 filled itself up with, there's just one retail space in the whole thing, Dollar General. Oh, the Dollar General and the beer place. Everything else in there, the other 11 uses are all restaurants and experiences and a bank and, those kinds of things. And those are the kinds of things that somebody who lives here might want to use. And I know that there's a Starbucks over by the outlet mall, and great. That checked off that box for the people who live here. But there's nothing else that's going on within this site that's necessarily synergistic with the real estate, save for with the residential, save for the fact that you have one restaurant. And I know it says 254 seats, 7,000 square feet is actually a relatively smallish restaurant. I'm not sure that 250 seats will fit in there. A typical TGI Fridays is more like 12,000 square feet. I don't know where else to go with the feedback that we can give you in terms of this. What I would be looking for, which is what we've told other applicants, is things that look like they were part of a master plan, look like they were parts that complemented each other and belonged together, and not just sort of the three things that I could sell today.
Bob?
Yeah.
I would also emphasize open space,
Yeah,
because you need space for people to go and just sit on a bench, or just, walk the dog, or, my guess is you may not have a lot of kids in this project, but if you do, you need spaces for those kids to go. You need green space, and there's nothing there.
Yeah, I agree with that. Even the hotel, I guess, won't have a pool for its guests or whatever other amenities that hotels would typically have. It just is maximizing the parking. I think that's probably the only summary I could come up with for what the site looks like. Are there abutters or interested citizens who wish to weigh in?
Thank you for your comments.
Mike, come on forward. Thank you, guys. We'll get back. You'll have a chance to respond to the things that the public brings up. Come on forward, Mr. Mills. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Sorry I didn't expect this to be heard as quickly. I'm sorry that I appeared late. A couple points I'd like to point out
Before
first.
you do that, though.
Yes, I'm sorry, my name is Michael Mills.
There you go.
And my address is 7 Arbor Street here in the town of Merrimack. I have a couple questions to start with about the meeting that was being held this evening. When I look at the meeting notice, it states that there's two parties that are going to be part of this hearing this evening. One is the Merrimack Premium, one is Merrimack LLC, and the other one is Slate. I haven't seen any application from Slate saying that they wanted to be a part of this meeting or that they were submitting any information. So my first question is, if this is being requested by two parties, shouldn't both of them make a request for this meeting? And if only one of them makes a request for this meeting, is that a properly held meeting? I say it is not.
Thank you for that. I appreciate the question, and we'll take the question under advisement. This is an opportunity for your private testimony, and I don't want to cut you off. I know you got more, but just
do
so you
have
know
more.
that the questions, it isn't a question and answer period, but it is a chance to
Okay.
provide testimony, and we'll take your questions under advisement and
Certainly.
approach them as we go through this. What else you got?
Okay, what else I have is that lack of notice. There was no notice of this meeting presented to any of the abutters.
Okay.
I believe it should have been. I believe it should have been. This is something that every abutter on the street and everyone in our neighborhood is very concerned about. And to post notices out, to send notices out on each of the other items on today's agenda and not notify the abutters that are directly adjacent to this property, I don't believe is proper. I don't think it's legal. I don't think it's ethical. Perhaps it was maybe it was a mistake, but I question this meeting. I want to thank the board for the questions that they brought up, the points that each of you made. I think you made some very valid points. I think one of the points that perhaps should also be addressed is that the area that they're talking about putting in the additional couple hundred units is basically half the size of the other parcel. One is about 3.5, and the other is a little over 6. Do the simple math. If 200 plus units fits on 6 acres, how possibly can 200 units sit on 3 acres? It's impossible. It doesn't make any sense. Please keep that in mind as any further discussion goes on. We've been, several of us have been to these meetings, one after another. And I'd like to make one other point to the planning board. That it's becoming quite obvious that in this town, if you want to get something approved, you keep coming before the board. You come before the board and you say, look at this beautiful plan that we have. We're going to build retail. And you come back a few years later and you say, oh, we can't build retail because the outlet center is there. The outlet center was there when these plans were approved. The outlet center, I doubt, has come up with any additional restrictions as to what type of retail can be built there. This was a plan to, let's make this really pretty. Let's build walkways here. Let's build a walkway across to Dunkin' Donuts so that people can go and get a donut. Let's not build a retail anymore. Let's build some nice restaurants. This will be great. People can come out, and that was a selling point. Back in what? I think this plan originally came out in 2015, 16, 17, 5 years ago. Let's build retail space. It's going to be fantastic. Now we don't need retail space. It's not the town's job to keep abreast of what the economy is. Retail is down simply because of the COVID problems that we've had. The COVID problems will go away, retail will come back. We shouldn't keep having meetings on this month after month after month to the point where the planning board and the zoning board say, we've had enough, sure, let's go ahead and approve it. And I'm not saying that you do that, but I can see how easy that would be to do. I would I'm tired of being here as often as I'm here. Sure, you're tired of having me here as well, and that's fine. I appreciate that. Let's go back to the original plan. There's no grass space out here. There's not an ounce of grass. It is pavement from Continental Boulevard out to the road into the outlet center, except for a pond. The petitioners came in, and in their writing, they said, we're building the restaurant and the hotel. It's under construction. Please drive by there and point out to me where the hotel and the restaurant are under construction. They paved the parking lot, but not a single stick, not a single beam has been built for the hotel and the restaurant. What is their credibility? What is their credibility to come in here time after time and say, look how nice we're going to make this. It's going to be wonderful. And yet when they submit things, they don't put down the owners of the property. They have the name of another person who's not the owner. They don't fill out all the complete forms that are necessary to appear before this board. And if anyone would like more detail, please call me. I'll be happy to go into more of that. But the forms that they submit for these meetings aren't even correct. And we're here believing that they're going to do the proper job and not be here in another month with a whole new plan. Please, people. I ask that let's go back to the original plan. You can't build 200 apartments on a 3-acre lot if you can only build 200 apartments on a 6-acre lot. How does that work out mathematically? It doesn't. Please listen to us. We're the neighbors. This is right next door to us. They're not going to be walking in there. They're going to be walking down, and that's fine. Walk down our streets, that's fine. But we're talking about, what, 400 or 500 families that have no place to go? That's not Merrimack. That's not what our town is supposed to be like. I think we all lived here in Merrimack. I've lived here for many, many years. I know it's changed a lot. That's fine, I expect that. But this is not the town of Merrimack.
Thank you,
very
Mr.
much.
Mills, and I'm not tired of seeing you. It's good to see you once in a while.
Thank
Thank
you
you for your testimony.
I try to bring up some good points.
If I can, Mr. Chairman, about the meeting notice requirements and things regarding conceptual discussion, just to get that out on the record. I did receive Mr. Mills' correspondence regarding the meeting. Two things. One, this is not a public hearing, it's a public meeting. There is actually no obligation for the board to have actually entertained any public comment here if you didn't so choose. The statute in question here is RSA 676(4)(2), regarding the planning board may provide for preliminary review of applications and plats by specific regulations subject to the following. The preliminary conceptual is limited to the defining the limits shall be directed at review of the basic concept of preliminary conceptual proposals and suggestions that might be of assistance in resolving problems with meeting requirements during final consideration. Such consultation shall not bind either the applicant or the board, and statements by the planning board member shall not be the basis for disqualifying said members or invalidating any action taken. The board and the applicant may discuss proposals in conceptual form only and in general terms such as desirability of type of development and proposals under the master plan. This is the key. Such discussion may occur without the necessity of giving formal public notice as required under subparagraph 1D, but such discussions may occur only at formal meetings of the planning board.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. For
May
that.
I point out that there's also two RSAs, one that discusses the types of meetings that there are and the requirements for those meetings, and I'd be happy to
It's
come
not a
back with the
non-public meeting, though.
RSA.
This is a public meeting.
However,
Yeah.
there's two types of meetings that can be held. One is a public meeting, one is a non-public meeting. When I approached the planning board and the zoning board, I was told that this was a non-public meeting.
Yeah. Clearly, it's not. We're here. It's the public. Thank you
Then
for
then
that.
that should be public. I went into the planning board last week and was told that we would not be allowed to speak this evening.
We were told you that it was not a public hearing, which is not. It
There
is
is
not
a-
a public hearing.
If it's a non-public hearing, there's 14 different conditions that have to be
It's not.
met.
I know, Mr. Mills, you're pursuing. You're sort of going down the path of looking at this as if it's a non-public hearing, which RSA 91A permits for a bunch of reasons. This is not a non-public
14
hearing.
reasons, exactly, A
It is-
through M.
Pardon me?
The reasons are listed A through M.
Indeed, indeed. Encounter them quite a bit. This is a public meeting, and we're taking your testimony as a courtesy because we'd like to hear it, but it isn't a hearing where we're deciding anything. That's kind of the point of a conceptual. That's the distinction that you're sort of caught up on. But thank you for the testimony. It is what it is. If you disagree, you're certainly willing to pursue whatever rights you think that gives you.
Is there anyone here on this planning board, I know you're not able to answer this question, but is there anyone here on this planning board that thinks that a citizen should be given wrong information when they go into the planning board office? I walked into the planning board office on 3 separate occasions within the last 10 days. On each occasion, I was told that the public would not be able to speak at this meeting because it was they came up with some real cutesy little words. I can look up what the words were.
Mr.
It was
Mills,
a separate type of meeting.
I know that you want to ask a question about what the planning board thinks of the meeting. It's not a question and answer
That's
period.
correct.
If you
I'm
want to
asking
offer
them
your,
to consider my question, and if they believe that a citizen should be able to walk into the planning board and ask a question about this meeting and be given wrong information,
Mr. Mills, you've made your
there
point,
should
but
be
you've
some
also
action taken.
you've also
Thank you.
clearly come prepared to offer testimony. You had pages and pages of written testimony. I think at some point you sort of knew we were going to ask you for it.
No, I'm not, no.
Thank you for that.
I'm going to just leave with asking each of you individually, if you think that I'm right, that you should walk into the planning board and get correct information, and you're not given correct information, should this board take any kind of action whatsoever? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Welcome and thank you. And I know that we know you well, but please introduce yourself. And also, if you'd like us to read your letter separately or whether you want to cover all of that while you're offering your testimony.
Well, I'll say what I can, Robert. Maybe you be the judge if you think you still need to read my letter. How's that?
Okay, it's your letter, and we've all read it privately. I
Yeah.
just whether
Oh,
we
no.
read it out loud into the record,
No,
and it'll be in the
it's
record
a
no matter
respectful
what.
letter, so it doesn't have anything.
Oh, I agree. Yeah,
you know.
I wouldn't if you were out of bounds or something like that. I
No.
would cut that,
No,
but you're
I
not.
wouldn't, I wouldn't
You're not,
speak
so.
that way.
So
Again,
please-
I'm Beth Burns.
There you
I live on Spruce Street. And first and foremost, I want to give everybody credit tonight for what you had to say. The points you made about, the space, traffic, how crowded it could be over there with I understand as I've done with every meeting, okay, I've tried to see it from the business perspective and as a neighbor, as a resident. I've tried to see both sides of the coin and be respectful about it because, I'm not here to argue with people in my life. I try to be as fair and reasonable as I can. And all I ask is the same in return. That's all I ask in return. And what I would greatly appreciate as we speak is if I showed up one day and I told Tom that I own some of the property on Greeley Park near his home, and I'm going to be making some changes. Now, I'm sure as a resident and all the time and money and years he's spent in that house with his wife and the children, you start to see things as a resident, not so much a business person, when it's your home. And that's all I've asked from him in return is to I'll put myself in his shoes as a business person, put yourself in mine as a resident. And we can walk together and we can do something that works for both of us, in favor of us both, business perspective and as a resident. And the points you guys made tonight, I'm thankful for. The things you've had to say, I appreciate it. And I really worry that with what space is left back there, if we get too anxious to just build because we're so anxious to sell, it will become so crowded over there that, again, we won't have sidewalks, we won't have space to breathe, we won't have room for proper landscaping, and it just will be such an overcrowded city appearance atmosphere that between how crowded it's going to look with the buildings and lack of things that should accommodate it, and the traffic and the lack of parking space, it's going to be like the city of Boston in the town of Merrimack in that area. So all I'm asking is, again, for everybody in the town and anybody in the building aspect of this, to really think about what space there is. There is a way to work around this and have it be, it's not like it once was. You're not gonna be able to build all these, you don't have the space to build all these big things. We may not, we just can't do it that way anymore, but we just build according to what space we have to work with. And let's make it look attractive. Let's make it really accommodate and feel like a residential area. These apartment buildings are huge. As you've seen, if you've driven by Dunkin' Donuts, there's barely any trees hiding it. I mean, it stands out enormously. And I get a darn good view from my backyard too, I can tell you that. So all I'm asking is just to please continue with the concerns you had tonight and address them. And any concerns that I've noted about what space we have and what I hope the outcome can be. I'd really appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. Some of the issues that were in your letter weren't discussed, so I still want to make sure that we cover those. Okay, we'll do that when the live testimony is finished. We'll take a look at your letter. Come on forward. Please introduce yourself once you get settled in, and then tell us what's on your mind.
Hi, I'm Barb Asketh. I'm at 1 Spruce Street. I'm pretty sure the planning board is aware of this, but I just had to point out, it really disturbs me that the area pointed out at the top that was potential open space is in fact our tree buffer that is required to be there and is not open space. And it disturbs me that the applicant didn't seem to be even aware that that was our buffer that is required.
Okay.
Also, in addition, talking about the open space, as people that live right around the corner, if there's no open space and people on the property and people want to get out and walk, where do you think they're going to go? Up and down our street, and if there's 400 people walking up and down our street, I'm not really that thrilled about that. I guess that's it. Thank
Do you want to show us the pictures that you brought, or?
It was just a picture showing our current view
Okay.
with the distance that is there. If that new building is put in, it's, it's gonna be right, literally in our backyard.
Right in the trees. Okay.
So I was very happy with the change to the parking garage, realizing that that will be close by, but not as obtrusive as
This apartment.
an apartment building. Also with the, we've talked before about lighting, and the way that the new proposed building faces, there'll be lights from windows directed right at all of us in the neighborhood behind.
If the pictures that you have, if you want us to consider them, you have to submit them for the record so that they can stay in the record. Otherwise, if you take them with, they were part of the discussion here tonight, but they wouldn't be part of the record or something that we could use for our decision.
There is no decision, so there really
Yeah,
is no.
it's true. It's true. Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you for your
thanks.
testimony. Any other abutters or citizens who wish to weigh in? Hey, Tom, come on.
I'm not an abutter, may I speak?
Of course, any interested citizen.
Oh, okay.
What was your name again?
Thank you. My name's Tom Koenig. I live at 1 Danforth Road here in Merrimack. For the record, I'm a member of the town council, and I have sat on this board in the past, but I'm currently an alternate member of the board. Barbara Healy from the town council sits in the council's representative position at this point. What I would like to point out, or what I would like to say and kind of amplify that you've heard tonight, is that the plan that was originally proposed before the 2015 or whatever, or 2017 approval, had outdoor amphitheater type spaces. It had all kinds of amenities to it. And it was modified to bring forward the plan that was presented to you in colored pictures in Tim Thompson's memo, which still looked very nice with a boulevard and kiosk and trees and walking space and things of that nature. And I was, I believe, part of the approval of that. I've since been off the board for several years, and haven't been involved with the latest renditions, but am frustrated. If we look back in history at all the different CUP places that the planning board has worked with, and some of the earlier planned unit developments and things like that, where they intended to have business or commercial or industrial and residential in them, you'll find almost without an exception, I don't know of an exception, but there's probably one, that people have come back 5, 10, 15 years later and said, well, I can't fill this building. I need to turn it into residential space. We find in North Merrimack that they've moved buildings from being commercial or business to being residential. We find down in South Merrimack that they put huge amounts of residential in and kept moving around what little retail they had till they have a small gas station or 7-Eleven equivalent, and some other old folks housing and stuff like that, but their commercial or their office is extremely small. We find all over the place that those kinds of things are happening. And yet this came forward, like every other one, that said we have this great plan for mixed use on our site, and it's going to have amenities for people. It might have a movie theater, it might have a restaurant, it might have, you know, retail that they can go to get their hair cut or something like that. And if you look at every one of them, none of them have that at this point. They keep coming back and saying, we can't do that, we need residential. I understand that residential is in need in this state. I understand that it's easy to rent an apartment, but I think they're totally in violation of the CUP process and what they came and presented to the board, at least when I was sitting on it. And I think it's time to stop. If that means we have to just stop allowing these kind of projects altogether because we don't believe the builders anymore, maybe that's what it takes. Because every single one that I'm aware of has changed their mind and come back begging the board that they're destitute and they're running out of funds and they're running out of money and they have to go build some residential instead. And I just don't believe it. In fact, I'm insulted by the plan that's been put forward tonight. It has absolutely nothing to do with what the plan was that was brought forward earlier. And in my opinion, that's just one more time that the developers have gone back on their words and back on their decisions. And I ask you to relay that to the developers for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Are there any other abutters or citizens who wish to weigh in? If not, then we'll close the public hearing and ask the applicant to come back up. Yep, well, we'll stop taking public testimony, and ask the applicant to come back. I have a comment or two and then a question. The question first. I didn't think about it before, but on the site as you've presented it to us, what would you do with snow?
Yeah, again, this is developed for a conceptual level. Those are all the things that we're going to look into after we get feedback and move the application along. But
Yeah. I don't see any space, obviously, to store snow, and I get that it's a conceptual and some things can be tweaked around a little bit, but I don't even see space where you could put snow or move something around, nor do I see enough space to put a dump truck to truck the snow away. And, the loader and the dump truck, and where would that sit in here? And clearing the site when it's that much residential in a field. I think that would be a serious challenge for the engineering effort to figure out what to do with the snow. I wanted to comment on the residential is needed concept, and I do know that New Hampshire is 20,000 units, housing units, below what its projected need is, and that's by the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. I use that all the time in front of other planning boards with other projects. And so I get the concept. It was 10,000 for years and years and years, and then the last couple of years, it's doubled to 20,000. That said, there was a time probably 3 or 4 years ago where we sort of added up what's in inventory under construction in Merrimack, and it was something like 1,200 housing units under construction before this additional one that you have, before Brookstone, before the most recent Harris Pond. I don't know what our current tally is, but it's probably something like 1,500.
It's close to 1,500, yes.
And to whatever extent that Merrimack's got an obligation to lean into this problem, I think we've done it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't mind, I get that it's private property and we're gonna allow applicants to come forward with their proposals, and I won't be the person that says we don't need any more of X, Y, and Z. But I also am not necessarily persuaded by arguments that suggest we've got an obligation because of a statewide shortage. I think that we've been pretty aggressive at that. Do you want to respond to some of the comments that you heard from the applicant? Not necessarily procedural questions. I think we'll leave that to our staff to answer things about notices and all of that sort of stuff, and we're satisfied with that. But this is sort of the substantive comments from the neighbors.
You know, I hear your comments, I hear the neighbors' comments. We will try to address those comments. I think probably the only thing that I feel like I want to respond to, and probably isn't even necessary, but I can't help but say that Mr. Monahan is a land developer, obviously. It's fine to say that we came in with a plan and hope to have something that everybody liked more than they like this plan. But it's not Mr. Monahan's fault that nobody wants to put in an office building or retail space. He actually marketed that plan for 5 years, and we got nowhere. So that's just a question of economic viability. And it may very well be that people who want to occupy space in an area such as this are not going to demand the buildings and the types of uses that we had hoped to be able to market. It's that simple. It's not that Mr. Monahan comes up to you and misrepresents anything. He's hopeful, he's optimistic, he's putting his name and reputation on the line, trying to get exactly what you want, just like what he wants. But it doesn't work, and I think I'll just leave it at that way. I know that this is a difficult thing. Land development is difficult, and it's difficult to get where you want to be, and you have to go step by step, and sometimes you have to take a step to the side. So,
thank you for that, Attorney Leonard. And I don't want my comments to sound like they're personal attacks or any suggestions of questions of people's integrity or things like that. That's just never what I do, and it's not what I meant here tonight. My test, when I look at a changed proposal, we get changed proposals all the time. You heard that in Councilor Koenig's testimony. My test that I apply when I look at a changed proposal is, would I have approved this if this is what we started with? You know, if this was the plan that we had when the field was vacant, would I approve it today? And when the answer is yes, then you allow that change because you would have done it from the beginning. As I look at this plan, if this is what was proposed on day one, I wouldn't have approved this as a conditional use permit. I wouldn't think that this has much master planning at all, or like I was talking about synergies. I think the site is overburdened. I think there's no open space. I don't know, you know, even when people live in an apartment, there's usually a little storage space for a bicycle and for, you know, a few things that people have. Yeah, whatever it might be. And boy, there isn't an inch given to, you know, any of that stuff here. Even under the buildings is entirely consumed by parking. I know that we talked before when we were looking at apartments on this site about where you would put a trash dumpster. And, you know, some of them, the discussion was that it would be under the building or it would be tucked in here or there. They're not here anymore, and I don't know where they would be. The hotel isn't going to put one under its building. The restaurant isn't either. And, you know, just these sort of the basic concepts that are needed. And the only way to get those things to fit in where you've got some green space and you got a bike rack and a little bit of storage space and a little bit of space for a dumpster and a little bit of space for snow is to do less on the whole parcel. Tone it down so that it fits on the parcel. I am of a mind to say that, especially in light of the variance, that a proposal can include some housing. I'm not saying none, but you know, you've got to complete the picture with those other synergies as a part of the discussion. And I don't know what the number would be. It depends on how you fit things together and how you could accomplish parking. I don't know if you'd have to do some kind of a structure in order to open up some green space and, to make the parking fit. I would want the sidewalk to make that complete turn around without people walking in a parking lot, all the way around the property with that, the way that it was when we had talked about it before. I want it to be a welcoming, warm development and not 4 buildings in a sea of asphalt. I don't even know what you see when you look out the windows from any of the buildings in any direction except for towards, Mrs. Burns' house. Everywhere else, you're going to see parking lot and highway. Because there isn't a tree or landscaping or a landscape island or a place to throw a Frisbee. That's my thought. Other members of the board? Nelson?
I will agree with your comments, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have to say. Yeah.
I know, I was just gonna say that I agree completely with what you're saying. I think it's horrible. The one that they had in 2017, that was great, and it was exciting to see that would be coming into town. And now this is, I'd like to even agree with you when you say that if this came to the board originally, I wouldn't approve that either. It's nothing that I wanna see. I don't wanna see it driving down Continental or driving down to the outlets or anything like that. In the green space, there has to be more green space. Like you said, where you gonna throw a Frisbee, walk a dog, stay off other people's neighborhoods, unless you can go outside, put a blanket down, have a picnic in your front lawn, or in your, in the conceptuals that you had for the other one. Beautiful open green spaces, you even show people sitting in them, and that's all gone. It doesn't work for me.
Barbara?
Yeah, I would just remind people that this is Merrimack, New Hampshire. We are a rural community. We are not an inner city urban environment. And we don't want it to look like downtown Boston, because even there's some green space in the outer suburbs of Boston. Here, there's nothing. This is not Merrimack. So I would just be cognizant of that in your development. Thank you.
Anyone else? Brian?
So I would just, make a recommendation that you work with the abutters to try and find solutions to some of these issues. I know this project has been fairly notorious in Merrimack for quite some time. And, I live fairly close to it. And so I always try to keep tabs on it as well. That's just kind of my suggestion for you guys.
Thank you, Brian. Anyone else? Maureen?
I just wanted to see if you thought of, instead of the office space, which you can't have, a destination type of place for young. I know the outlets is a destination place already. I mean, people come from all over to go there. So something maybe for kids, for teens, for people who are living there. Just some type of recreation that, okay, so we're going to go to the hotel or we're going to go to the outlets, so now we're going to bring the kids here, or same with the adults. I think something more entertainment might be another draw where I get that you don't have office space. But again, and then going back to that mixed use, just a thought.
Lynn? No comments? Again, when I mentioned the test that I apply to a change proposal, I'm not opposed. People have the right to change their mind and propose a different thing. But I evaluate it and say, what would I do if this was the initial proposal? One other thing, and didn't really come up in the discussion, but when the hotel was originally proposed and it had some meeting space and things like that, it was sort of clear what kind of hotel it was. And I just want to make sure I'm clear in understanding this. Is this a regular hotel or an extended stay hotel in the proposal?
Hi, Tom Monahan.
You would know better than anybody.
I'm the guy.
Yeah, but for these comments, we love it.
It's a Marriott Fairfield Inn.
Okay.
It's a Marriott franchise, and our plans were to start quite a while ago, but I certainly was not going to start, for the last couple of years, not knowing what was going to happen. We just received our construction drawings last week, and so we're in the you know, we're pad ready now. All utilities are brought to the site, so we're ready to go vertical as soon as we get organized enough to hopefully get our building permits. But
Okay.
but you know, I have to. I understand what everybody said tonight. You know, it was on my watch that the outlets were done. We were the landowners. We did it with Simon. And every day I go up there, or when I go up there, I'm very, very proud of what we did. I'm very proud of it. It was contentious for a while, but at the end of the day, I think most abutters, if not all, realized that what we said we were gonna do, we did. You know, and that's what brings me to this meeting tonight. Because all we asked for was a conceptual meeting to hear what I heard. And for that, every single one of you, including the abutters, I thank you. Because I hear you. And we are, you know, the hotel is gonna be built, the restaurant's gonna be built, and the vacant 3.15 acre lot will be built on, and I heard what all you folks said, and you'll see us back, and hopefully it'll be something that it'll be acceptable to all parties. It's very important to me. Housing is a big issue for me. You know, I'm the chairman of the National Housing Authority, have been on the Housing Authority for 35 years. All kinds of housing is necessary, and maybe I got carried away and got lost in the we gotta get more units. We need more units in the area. And that's not just me saying it, it's talking to industry who's having difficulty hiring and the whole thing. But at the end of the day, not to beleaguer anything, I've learned a lot tonight. The worst part of the night was when I left my house, I had to drive by 3 ice cream stands and I couldn't stop. So yeah. But anyways, thank you very much. Tim, thank you very much.
Before you leave, I did forget to read Mrs. Burns' letter after saying not to forget it. And most of the testimony, I think, was well covered, but one of the things that she raised in here is one that you should hear, and that is the sense that the contractors are making a bit of a mess around the site in the neighborhood, and I'm sure that's something that you can take care of with some conversations with them.
I actually, I didn't go to the ice cream stands because I went out to the site to take a look. And the construction site is all fenced. I did hear that earlier today, and the construction site is fenced. There has been wind, as we all know, and I apologize, and I will make sure that it's taken care of. If it doesn't, to me, it didn't look bad, and I'm a pretty tough judge on it, and it didn't look that bad, but it should look better. So I'm on it.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think, I don't know whether the sort of the general conditions are part of the development agreement. That's always part of a conditional use permit, but keeping the site neat and organized. But one way or another, that should certainly happen.
Yeah, and that's the first I've heard about it all along. I know initially we had working on a Saturday morning or something early, or starting the equipment early. And when Tim gave us the call, we stopped we smartened up and didn't do it.
Okay.
So
thank you for looking into that. I'm sure Mrs. Burns will tell you more about the details of it. Otherwise, her letter is part of the record, the whole thing. If you haven't gotten a copy of her letter, you're certainly welcome to get one from the file. We can get one emailed to you so that you've seen the whole thing.
Okay.
And then that'll be part of it. With that in mind, if you don't need anything else from us, we will sort of check this off of our agenda and move on. Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? All set?
Thank you.
Tim, is there anything else that we need to do before we move on?
No, conceptual now. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Yeah, if you want to give. Okay, sounds good. Item 7 on our agenda is Black Diamond Holding LLC as the applicant, and 744 DW Highway LLC and 746 DW Highway LLC as the owners. Review for acceptance and consideration of final approval for a lot line adjustment and a condominium conversion of existing commercial space. The parcels are located at 744 and 746 DW Highway in the C2 commercial, general commercial and aquifer conservation districts. Tax map 7E, lot 35 and 36. Case Planning Board 2022-17. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The applicant's here before you. This is the lot where Nothing But Good Times is located up in the northern part of town. The main portion of this application, as we've been made aware of this morning, is to adjust the lot line between lots 35 and 36, with lot 36 giving about 19,715 square feet of land to lot 35. The applicant was also proposing a condominium conversion of the existing building into 3 separate ownership areas. However, we were informed this morning that there is now a buyer for the entire building, so that they are not wishing to proceed forward with the condominium conversion portion of the project. So I recommend the board go through the application with Matt, and that if you get to the point of conditional approval, we add some conditions to remove all the condo conversion parts of the application from the plans.
Okay, thank you for that introduction, Tim. Is AAA still one of the occupants of the building?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Please introduce yourself and tell us where we're at.
All right, good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'm Matt Peterson with Keach Norsham Associates, here representing the lot line adjustment at 744 and 746 DW Highway. As Tim outlined here, my office actually used to be at this location until I took a job with Keach Norsham, so I know this building extremely well. The previous owner, Chris Strickler, had 2 potential buyers last month. One buyer wanted it to be condoed. One buyer was just going to buy the whole thing based on scheduling. I submitted for the condo. They closed, I think, last week on the back parcel there, and this owner does not want it to be condoed. He's just going to keep it as one building. So that is why we would like to remove the condo of this tonight. It's pretty straightforward what we're looking to do. I think you all have the plans that were in front of you. We're looking to move the lot line about 42 feet to the west to give as much land that we can to lot 35 up in there. We are in the process of doing some conceptuals on that right now. However, I think where I set the lot line that I'm asking for to be moved today, I think is going to be in my building setback on my new building on that lot, so I might have to go to the zoning board and ask for some more relief. We're looking at probably a 60,000 square foot building on the site is what we've done a concept on to date. So this is just phase 1 to move the lot line, to sell off the back building, and then to have the parcel in front to do something as a future development. We're actually also in the process on the Majestic Motors, working on that site as well right next door. So we're kind of doing a combined, we're looking to bring sewer hopefully up through this site here and then into the other site instead of coming up DW Highway. But preliminary stages right now on a lot of that stuff. And just here for lot line adjustment, I think after that last presentation, I'll keep it short and let you guys ask me any questions that you want. But I know my wife's waiting for me at home, and I'm sure you guys all have loved ones as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Our first order of business will be determining that the application is complete. And with that in mind, does the board have any questions necessary for that issue to be resolved? If not, is there a motion? Is there a second? Do you have a comment on it too?
No, I was just going to make a motion
Okay.
to accept it.
Motion and a
Yeah.
second to accept the application as complete. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 700. Okay, are there any waivers that you've requested? No. I don't see any waivers requested.
No, there aren't.
Does the board have any questions about the lot line adjustment? I don't.
Just one quick question.
There is no
Right-
sidewalks.
What's that?
No sidewalks.
So there is no sidewalk.
I didn't hear what he said.
He said there were no sidewalks.
Sorry, Nelson. Just had to.
No, I wasn't even going to push for that. Because I understand you've already got a problem with the state up there. But I wanted to be sure that the easement, that the back lot is serviced just by an easement. Is that right?
Correct.
And that easement will extend into this new, you got that covered. So
Yes, we extended the 42 feet to the property line there.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. And other than that, I think I had no other comments. Thank
Just
you.
following up on that, Nelson, this lot was granted a variance back, I believe, around the time I was born to allow it to be there without frontage
Let's
and
not go that
access through
far.
the easement. Huh?
It was about 05, 06, I think.
No, it's actually in the 70s.
Really?
Yeah, we did the
Oh.
research on it.
Oh, I was there.
Because I got it at one, okay, all right. It's all right. Interesting.
Tim, I see the comment in here about the easements or applicable legal documents recorded in the Hillsborough County Registry of Deeds. Do we not typically have our town's legal staff review?
We do.
A change to easement? Is
Yeah.
that in here, in one of your conditions to do that?
Uh,
Yeah, I see it.
Yes, number two.
Number two. I was looking at the general and subsequent conditions, and I saw it there too. Okay. All right,
We always have the review as the precedent condition and the recording as the general.
perfect. Thank you for that. Any other questions by members of the board? Are there any abutters or interested citizens who wish to weigh in? Come on forward.
Bear with me, I've never been to one of these or anything. I was just curious, I got the letter that I'm gonna butter. My name's Andrew August, I live at 740, which is, I guess, technically in front of, yeah, that one. So I'm just kinda curious what is actually gonna be changing and if it's gonna affect my property at all.
Matt, you want to point out where your lot line is and where it's moving to?
Currently, right now, the lot line is right here.
Yep.
And we're just moving it back to this point here.
Oh, okay.
If anything goes on this piece here,
Yep.
you'll get notified again for a site plan, and then we'd be back in front of this board.
Okay, perfect.
Matt
I got the
wasn't
woods
by a
behind me, I
microphone
love
for the
those woods,
record.
So I just don't wanna see anything happen to those. That's all.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I just want to repeat what Matt said because he wasn't by a microphone to say it. He pointed out the change in the lot line and told the abutter that there would be notice if anything was done on the front lot. Any other abutters? All right, we'll close the public hearing. Matt, you can come back. And discussion by the board?
Just a note that whoever makes the motion to add to the precedent conditions of approval to remove all of the information regarding the condo conversion.
Okay. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Brian has the motion. Nelson?
Oh,
Nelson
go
can,
ahead. Doesn't matter.
whatever it takes to rob Nelson. his
What?
motion.
That's okay.
Okay, a motion to grant the
Who was- who
lot
was-
line adjustment
who was the
minus the
second?
condo. We'll call Lynn the second. We'll call Lynn the second. Lot line adjustment with the conditions in the staff memo, but not the condominium concepts to be removed. Discussion, none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 700, to grant that. Thank you,
Thank you. Have a good night.
Matt. Let's see, item 8 on our agenda is Merrimack Smiles as the applicant and Siam 04 Realty LLC, review for acceptance and consideration of final approval of site plan to raise an existing building and construct a 4,500 square foot dental office. The parcel is located at 75 DW Highway in the I-1 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts, tax map 2D, lot 28, case planning board 2022-16. Tim, is there anything, let's see,
Mr. Chairman, there's a email that should be in your packet that we received that they're requesting continuance on this to the May 3rd, 2022 meeting. We just received peer review comments on this, and the applicant would like to address those and be in a better position to get the plan approved at the next meeting.
Thank you for that, Tim. Reading the item into the record just sort of brought back my memory of Alistair, where I could pick on him for the English, offering up the word raise to mean knock down. If not, does anybody want to make a motion to do the continuance?
So moved.
Is there a second? Nelson can have the second. With no further notice to abutters. Discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 700. Okay, back to the agenda. We have discussion and possible action regarding other item of concern. There is one deadline extension somewhere in my
We have an
piles.
extension request. This is for the 102 Joppa Road, the equestrian facility. They are requesting a 6-month extension to address the remaining issues with regarding conditions of approval.
What's the will of the board with respect to the request for a 6-month extension of the time to meet the conditions of approval?
Let Nelson make
I'll
it.
try.
Nelson, Nelson got in there.
Okay.
Is there a second? Barbara has the second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 700. Anything else under items of concern?
No, other than to add that there was an additional plan that we need you to sign when the meeting's over.
Yeah, I see that, there's a whole heap of them. Okay, do we have to approve minutes? Approval of minutes of March 15th, 2022. Oh, I'm sorry. Lynn?
What would it take to name the roundabout after Alistair?
I don't know.
Question for that guy.
Okay.
It's a town council question, huh?
Okay.
It's not a planning board quiz.
I was
They
just,
don't let us name
I was just,
anything.
I would raise the issue with the town manager, and he can
We'll
go
do
through the
that.
proper process.
I think it should be called Alistair's Circle. Okay. Thank you for that suggestion. Okay, the minutes of March 15th, 2022. What's the will of the board? There's a motion to approve as distributed. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Will let Nelson be the second again? All in favor, say aye.
Two of them.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 7-0. I'm sorry, abstaining? Okay, 6-0-1 for that vote, with one abstention. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded?
Second.
Second by Nelson. There can be no discussion on a motion to adjourn, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 7-0-0. Thank you all for getting through a very busy agenda in some really pretty decent time. Don't forget to turn your microphones off, and thank you very much for the work.